It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Jackie Guild. She's the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, along with one of her staff attorneys, Molly Brown. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Congratulations to you, Jackie. You were confirmed on April 23rd as the new Director of the Office of Environmental Policy for the City of Annapolis.
That's correct.
Will that affect your job as Executive Director of the Chesapeake Legal Alliance?
It will. I will work at the Alliance until the 16th of May, and then I will start my duties with the city on the 17th. So I'll go right through the finish line. But we have an interim director. One of our board members, who's the former Baltimore harbor keeper, Eliza Smith-Steinmeier, will be filling in for me while we start our job search.
Great. Okay, for those that don't know what the Chesapeake Legal Alliance is, it is a nonprofit. You're headquartered right here in Annapolis, and I'm going to take a blurb from your website, but if you want to explain this further in language that might be less websitey, it's dedicated to using the law to improve the quality of the Chesapeake Bay. That's what your organization does.
In a nutshell, so how we do that is that we have built a network of volunteer attorneys, and through that network we provide free legal services to the individuals, the community groups, and the not-for-profit organizations that are working to protect and restore the Chesapeake Bay.
And that is a big job. The Chesapeake Bay, it goes well beyond Anne Arundel County, straight down into southern Virginia. It lets out into the Atlantic Ocean. And the top of the Chesapeake Bay, well, it goes far up into New York, actually.
Right. The headwaters are in Cooperstown, New York.
Right.
So, yes, we cover the entire 64,000 square mile watershed.
And let's talk about what happened in recent history. A new administration in Washington, lots of policies that might not be in line with what environmentalists want to see. Does that mean more lawsuits?
It can mean more lawsuits. There are some things that are happening with the current administration that have not worked their way all the way through the regulatory process, so they're not ripe yet for lawsuits. It could down the road.
And then how do you we have the Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch has joined a number of class action lawsuits with other states to ensure that things that are happening set by policy in Washington aren't going to affect our citizens here, including environmental issues. Where's the line that where you all get in, or where Brian Frosch, what he's doing, is what's that line?
All right, so Brian is acting on behalf of the state, obviously. So we can get involved with state actions. I mean, especially with citizen suits, you always issue a letter of intent to sue, but you give the regulatory agency the opportunity to take action themselves. If they do not, then we could get involved with something at the state level. In other areas, we don't have to work with the state at all. We work at the local level, the municipal level, with the city of Annapolis on everything from A to Z where an attorney can be useful. It could be a land use and zoning issue. It could be an industrial discharge. It might be a critical area violation, or we could be working on new legislation or new regulations.
Okay, so are there some crossover cases where you will call up the Attorney General's office and say, we need your help?
Absolutely. Yeah. For example, a few years ago, there was a issue with the Crownsville dump. And they have about 300,000 abandoned tires there, as well as some other contamination from, it was a no longer functioning dump. So the South River Federation had tried to get the Attorney General's office to look into reopening a consent decree that governed the cleanup of that site. It had been lying dormant for a number of years. They weren't having a lot of success, so we got a volunteer attorney involved with it who started contacting the Attorney General's office and reigniting their interest in the landfill, which they did reopen the case. New consent decree was negotiated, and that landfill is now being cleaned up.
Now, does that happen as a result of Jesse knowing a thing or two about the law as a lawyer and as the South River Keeper, knowing what can help, versus maybe a nonprofit that doesn't exactly know?
It can help. A lot of our groups do have attorneys on staff, whether or not they're practicing. Jesse Iliff and a lot of other water keepers are attorneys, but sometimes a not-for-profit will come to us that just needs to understand what their rights are and what they can do. That is more often the case, and we help them actually identify where the legal issues are and where they can make a difference.
So Molly, you were one of the staff attorneys. How many staff attorneys keep you company in the office?
One other staff attorney. There's 2 of us in total.
So the entire Chesapeake Bay is many miles long. There's got to be a lot of issues that need legal attention. You all can't do it by yourself. You said you have a whole contingent of attorneys. How many volunteer attorneys do you have, Molly?
We have over 300 in our network.
That's amazing. In Virginia, in Maryland, in D.C.,
they're
and
licensed.
New York.
We have attorneys that are licensed in each one of the Bay jurisdictions. So New York down through Virginia.
300 attorneys. Do you need more?
Absolutely. The more resources we can provide our potential clients, the better off they'll be.
And who
the
should
health
they-
of the Chesapeake Bay.
And who should they reach out to if they're listening to this and saying, I'm a lawyer, I want to help?
Either me or Mary Clemenson. You can just call the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, and we'll help you out.
The best way to reach you, you can go through the website, chesapeakelegal.org, or the phone number.
It's 410-216-9441. And on top of those 300 lawyers, we have 101 law firms. So you look at these law firms, many of them have 250, 500, 1,000 lawyers. So that's a potential group that we're tapping into. Often pro bono coordinators will call us to put us on their list of pro bono opportunities.
That's amazing that they do this. And sometimes people think of lawyers as, money hungry and chasing just the big suits. That's not the case here.
No, it's not. But there's many attorneys that wish to donate their time to a cause that they feel personally attached to. And the environment especially is something that especially young attorneys are very interested in participating in.
Is there a financial incentive to them? Is there a write-off for this?
No, there's not. The law firms do encourage pro bono work. In some states there's a pro bono requirement, and some firms have an informal pro bono requirement, so they satisfy that through pro bono work. There was no group really providing an opportunity for pro bono environmental work before in the Chesapeake Bay watershed before the CLA was formed.
That's cool. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, more about the Chesapeake Legal Alliance. This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Jackie Guild, the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, along with one of our staff attorneys, Molly Brown. There's 2 staff attorneys. Jackie will be leaving. She's soon. She'll be starting as the new Director of the Office of Environmental Policy for the City of Annapolis. Back to the Chesapeake Legal Alliance. We hear of all the great work all of these attorneys, not just your staff attorneys, but 300 plus and plus their law offices too are doing. Give me some examples.
All right. And I just gave you the one about the Crownsville dump cleanup that occurred. And then on a smaller scale, we had great success just recently. Turtle Run is a development that's in Deal. And this was where a development was trying to go in along some of the most pristine forested land that's waterfront. And a citizens group, as well as the West Road Riverkeeper, and later the Chesapeake Bay Foundation got involved with it. This went on for years. Predates me even, probably started in 2009, this litigation. There are actually 10 two-hour hearings just on the citizens standing alone. This is what happens when citizens are not represented. Usually the other side is represented by well-heeled lawyers, and they can outlast the citizens and outmaneuver them. And this was the case in this particular proposed development. So standing was granted to the West Road Riverkeeper as well as the citizen groups. And in the end, it was found that what they were trying to do, where they're trying to develop in the critical area, was not allowed. And the Critical Area Commission actually stepped in and weighed in on it as well. So the development will not go forward as planned. And they've saved this land. And it was important to the area citizens because they had years previously, saved a 400-acre tract right next to it, Franklin's Point State Park.
Right. And it's so precarious right now in South County. One road in, one road out on the Mayo Peninsula.
Right.
Lots of parks, which are good for the environment, but it's concerning to the residents down there. Too much traffic. And, developing on land that's already getting flooded continually. It will not go forward as planned. Does that mean
it won't go forward at all?
Okay.
What the plan was to build houses on the waterfront. That's not going to be allowed. They were trying to move actually densities inland to waterfront, and that is just not allowed under the law. And in this case, we were just basically arguing the law, and the attorneys for the developer were trying to circumvent that. Do you have anything to add to that, Molly? You attended some of the hearings.
I did. We are hopeful that the county is going to follow through with its proposal to purchase about 140 acres in Churchton and put it into preservation and parkland down
Nice.
there. And that would help avoid any future arguments with this developer regarding plans to develop that property into residential homes.
Have you been involved with the return of the yellow perch in areas of the Magathie?
We have. In fact, we had a win last year regarding the Cattail Commons proposed development. There was going to be townhomes and commercial sites and single-family residential homes put into Cattail Commons development that was at the headwaters. It was going to be at the headwaters of Cattail Creek, which is a prime area for yellow perch spawning.
Right.
And we were able to step in and negotiate with the developer. And instead of the large development that was planned going in, instead 9.4 acres of that area is now being put into permanent preservation. So we're hoping that, that 9.4 acres is really going to help that mission to help the yellow perch out.
And how did you get involved with that one? Was that through the Severn River Association?
That was through the Magathie River Association.
Or I'm sorry, Magathie River Association, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Paul Spadaro.
Okay.
He was a champion for yellow perch.
I know. I'm well aware. I've had him on my show. All right, Queen Anne's County. What cases have we?
Right now, in Queen Anne's County, we're involved in monitoring potential stormwater violations.
And that's in Kent Island, in Chester.
Yes.
Yeah.
So CLA doesn't take sides on development. What we do is we ensure that development happens in a legal and appropriate way in Anne Arundel County and throughout the watershed. Right. So what we're doing in Queen Anne's County is really monitoring the development to make sure that it is happening in a way that's the best way for the Chesapeake Bay. Jackie often talks about the fact that when we get attorneys involved, it ends up the developers appreciate the fact that attorneys are getting involved because oftentimes it ends up with a better result for everyone, not just the health of the bay, but it ends up with a better development that has better stormwater regulations. They're not going to face the problems and the issues with local citizens that they would moving forward had this not been set up in an environmentally responsible and legal fashion to begin with.
And this did result, I'm not sure if it was you all were part of this, that had a stop work order issued in one of the past big storms.
Right. The Queen Anne's Conservation Association was involved with that, and they are a group that we partnered with. They've been a client before, but we weren't involved with that particular action.
All right. This note is being added after the interview took place. As a matter of full disclosure and in the interest of transparency, I've been involved in the Key School community for many years and in many volunteer roles for the school and for its parents association. And there's been a stop work order issued recently on the shores of the Severn River with the Key School.
The Key School.
Yeah.
Right, that was with the Annapolis Roads community.
Right. Are you involved with that one at all?
I've talked with that community, and I actually advised them to try to work something out with the Key School. And I think then that state had already stepped in by that point. There had been enough outcry in the media where they got involved. But often groups like Annapolis Roads will come to us early on in the process, and that's the best way to get involved with us. If you see
So that you
something
can
happening,
keep an eye on things.
So that whether it's an industrial discharge or it's a stormwater problem or it's an endangered species violation, some kind of any other kind of contamination issue. If you see something you don't understand it, you can come to Chesapeake Legal Alliance and we'll help research the problem and identify if there is a legal hook to it and help your community or whatever group it is involved come up with a plan. That's not to say that other groups don't come to us when something has progressed further down the line. It's also a lot easier on us to find attorneys if we have more time, more of a runway.
So if you see something, say something.
Exactly.
All right. We're going to take another short break. We will be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Jackie Guild, the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, along with one of our staff attorneys, Molly Brown. We're talking about all the work that the Chesapeake Legal Alliance is doing, has done on behalf of the Chesapeake Bay, which extends from Cooperstown, New York, all the way down to Hampton Roads, Virginia, where it lets out into the Atlantic Ocean. You did mention if you see something, say something, speak up. You can work on behalf of laws that are being violated, including endangered species. And I alluded to this before we started this interview. I am a birder. I am a wildlife photographer. I am a nest monitor for the bald eagle nesting project here in Maryland. Drones. This is an ongoing legal concern. Jackie?
It is. It's a developing area of the law. And in fact, last summer we had one of our interns develop a memorandum looking at what the laws are in each bay watershed state in the District of Columbia. It's an evolving area of the law, and there's sometimes where it doesn't make sense, and it could be strengthened as far as protections and the type of evidence you need to identify when there's a problem, whether drone evidence of someone using a drone where they shouldn't be using it could be at issue, and what laws apply. So
strengthened at state level?
It's state level.
Okay. So if a crime is being committed, we have the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, we have the Migratory Bird
Act, yeah.
And if those are being violated and the hands of law enforcement are tied with what they can do, you'd say the Maryland legislature should get involved with new laws.
Exactly, and we have become involved with legislation on behalf of different not-for-profits before that are advancing certain legislation. We also work with the Maryland Legal Conservation Voters and help them with some of the background support for their agenda. Oysters are another area we've become involved in with legislation last year when they did the legislation that required a study of our existing oyster populations. We helped with some of the background research on that to support the legal research on that.
Maryland Department of Natural Resources, you work closely with them.
We have good working relationships with all the state agencies and the federal agencies. I do think that the folks at DNR, especially once they get to know us and who we are very receptive. They would rather have you to their meetings and involved in their meetings early on rather than have citizen groups attacking them later who don't understand what's happening. So we're finding we as a organization are invited more often, and they seem receptive to partnering on sharing information.
That's good. Menhaden? Where are we at with Menhaden? This is the feeder fish of the Chesapeake Bay. Without Menhaden, the Chesapeake Bay could collapse, right?
So we have a couple of issues going on with Menhaden. We have a couple groups in New York we're working with. Molly, do you want to share some more information about that?
Sure. We are working with groups as to how to tackle the policies concerning menhaden harvesting. So we don't have any active lawsuits right now regarding menhaden. It's more of a strategic look as to the value of the fish and how we can best influence the policies that are being made at the federal level.
And that's in New York, and I'm talking about a different state when I'm asking this question, can one state sue another?
They can.
And
we almost did that.
And you know why I'm asking that question.
When Doug Gansler was our Attorney General here in Maryland, he contemplated suing the state of Virginia about menhaden. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission made enough of an adjustment to the catch limits to avoid that lawsuit, so that it wasn't such an egregious take that it would rise to the level where he thought he should sue over it. So that didn't happen. But yes, it can happen. And it's very important. I mean, this is something that's been going on for years. It's overfished, and it affects all the other species that feed on menhaden. So that's where you see disease kick in because of, and you see underweight birds, underweight fish, and then they become more prone to disease.
Ladies, thank you very much for doing all that you do for our environment.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
And to your staff members and all the volunteer attorneys as well, and thank you for being here today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.